Hey guys, we're back. This time we're going to be taking a look at a new asymmetrical deck builder, Firefly Misbehavin. This one was sent to me by Galeforce9 to do a review of here. And it's a really interesting take on the deck builder with 4 asymmetrical powers set in the Firefly universe, where you have these story cards that affect your setup, and you're using your little tableau building mechanic in front of you to build up a set amount of power based on the number of players. It's got a couple interesting mechanics, and we'll get right in and take a look at it. I'm sure everything's a mess because I flipped the box over, but first off here we have our rule book, and they've got a nice component list, an introduction to the game, which basically tells you the what you're going for. There's a learn to play QR code, which is kind of nice. Over here is your goals based on the number of players. And then some examples there. They have a setup sheet, lots of artwork from or screenshots from the actual show and movie. We've got our board set up for a 4-player there. Then they go through how the player board works, how the different cards work. Pretty easy to understand. It is a little bit more complicated than your standard deck builder, and we'll get to that. But there you have the market board, and these are basically where you're going to be buying your different resources from to add to your deck. And then we have card breakdowns, how abilities work. Then they go through simulated turns, how activations work. So they go into a lot of detail on here. Again, I think the how to play video on the QR code is going to help you. There's a lot to this. It looks very complicated when you're trying to read from the book, but it's not as bad as it sounds. Definitely watch the how to play video. This is your other supply market, and this one's kind of neat in that in your games, these top 2 are always going to be the same. One of them is the shiny, and the other one is the black. The black are kind of like penalty cards that are going to be put in your deck, and the rest of these are stuff you buy and add to your deck for bonuses. Down here we have these 4, and you can't see it on here. I'll show it when we get to the board. But underneath these decks there's card types. Like this is a negotiation, this is a fight, and these are maneuver cards down here. And you don't always use the same ones of these. You switch them up based on the scenario you're playing, or you can just make up your own combinations. But those are kind of cool. The one thing about these, they have this item icon on the bottom, if it'll focus. These little action icons, and they got the crate there. Whenever you play a card with that icon on there, instead of going to your discard pile, they go back to these decks. So they're like one-time use things, so you have to keep that in mind when you pick them up. But they're kind of cool, and they're guaranteed. You know what you're going to get. They're always available as long as there's cards left in the pile. What else is in here? It's been a long time in the rule book here. Then they talk about, building the supply decks and how they work. Then there's some variants in the back. It does come with a reread deck of cards. I have not played with those yet, so I haven't done this variant, but definitely interested to try it. And then the episode cards, which I quickly talked about, they have on the bottom here, as you can see, it specifically labels what cards go into the supply, changes up the conditions and things a little bit too for your games to make them different so they're not always the same. Then we got a strategy section in the back, section that goes over the different factions, and I think they give you some tips based on the factions you're playing. Some game terms, a Q&A, and then a quick reference guide to symbols on the back. A lot in there. It is a thicker book, like I said. There's a lot of mechanisms all going on at the same time, and watching that how to play video will help you with that. They do have this quick start guide, which basically guides you through a few turns of a basic game setup so you can see how it plays. And they do each one with the factions person up here, what they're doing, counters to it. It's actually a really good example book. And yeah, basically guides you through. I don't know if it's a whole game. I think it's just some turns. Yeah, and then they skip later till later in the game on the back there. But that's a cool guide, and it gives you something you can look at to see the progression of a game, the actions taken each turn, counter actions, and so on. Next we have a flyer for Firefly the game. Big fan of that one. I already have everything for it. We got Brigands and Browncoats on the back. I own that one too, but we have not played it as much. Then we get into the actual stuff here. Let's see if I can keep it on camera. And I will say this insert does a good job of separating everything, but I'll show you my problems with it as we go. They have these little indentations here for the rule books. Nice finger grabs though to get things out of there. So this is our supply board. So you're going to have a core deck, a border deck, and a rim deck. In the cards here, you'll have 2 available to buy from each of these. This is just like any deck builder. So you're going to have these available cards out here that you can pick up. The core deck tends to be more expensive but better stuff. Border deck is kind of in the middle, and then the rim deck is the random stuff. And you'd find in these what you would expect to find in them if you're a fan of Firefly. Rim deck, border deck, you're going to find, you know, patience and things like that from the Frontier. Core deck's going to be your Alliance stuff. There's actually planets that you can get. I think there's planets in all 3 decks, but things like that. So it really changes up what you get based on where you go. So when you buy things out of there, the replacements that come back out are going to be themed to those areas. Next we have are the player boards, and these are asymmetrical too. So you can see here, get 2 of them here. This is Niska's board. So Niska's board has 5 asset sections up here, but only 4 back here. These ones back here are characters. These are character or items. This one is item only. So you can only have a certain amount of cards out in front of you based on the faction you're playing. Where, for example, here's Serenity has 4 assets out here, but more, you get up to 4 characters, up to 4 items, and then big one of each on the end. On the flip side of these, they do have a B side, which is the same for everyone. So one of the variants is you can change things up to make it more balanced in that. But I like the asymmetrical because it actually plays into the strengths of the factions. Like there you can see Badger's company there only has 4 and 4. I think the Alliance has, yeah, 5 and 5 because, you know, the Alliance. And they're color themed to the different factions, so you can tell them apart. They also have the different faction logos up here in the corner. And the Alliance one's stuck. There we go. So you can see the logos up there. Next we have the supply board here, and this is what I was talking about. You're always going to have the shiny cards available. You're always going to have the black cards available. And now you can see on these, any deal card can go here. Any fight card can go here. Any maneuver card can go here. And then any one of the 3 can go here. So you can have a game with like double fight cards and make things more aggressive. Or double deal cards or double maneuvers. It's however you want to set it up. Or if you're doing one of the story cards, it's how the story is set up. Next thing, I have all these in bags. I don't think the game actually came with bags, so keep that in mind. You have the faction tokens. Each faction has, I think, 6 tokens, maybe 5, matching their symbol. So in that case, those are the Serenity ones. Those are the Niska ones with the knife. These are the Badger ones. Badger's hat on there. And then the Alliance ones have a warrant on one side and a Alliance logo on the other. These have different abilities based on the faction you're playing. Then we have a bunch of tokens here which are used to represent your bonuses you're going to be getting, as well as the combat token there. It's got an actual fight symbol on the other side. And then this is a part of the insert that's kind of weird. Cards fit in here. They're separated out when you first get them. These, for some reason, don't go all the way down, which is a shame. If they had, they would be perfect because there's plenty of room to stack cards on the edge. And as you can see, I sleeve these. They no longer fit in these slots, so they're kind of a mess here, but we'll go through them on the side here. So first thing we have are the episode cards. And these are used to change up your setup. Like I said in the examples there, they tell you what supplies to put on this board here, and it can vary up. It also can change the win conditions up here. And you'll see like these ones player determined, you can still make whatever you want out of it. Bunch of different ones of these. They basically allow you to play up similar themes to specific episodes. Next we have our starting decks. So each of your factions is going to start with one of these these little reminder cards here. It's got your turn actions, activation, and fight on the back for quick reference. It has the burst tokens in there. So each faction is going to have a way to earn burst tokens. When they earn them, that's how you get those little faction tokens that are here. And you can spend them for different things, and these are different for each group. So 2 of them will get you an activation here, 1 will get you a draw a card, or 2 will get you a draw card, 2 will get you a +1 recruitment, 1 will let you retain a guy that's being played, and 1 also lets you replay. So those are kind of neat. Each faction has one of those little cards like that. And then you have a 10-card deck that is themed around the faction. You have the faction logo here on the bottom. So this would be the Serenity deck. And all the cards obviously have artwork from the show. You have different types of cards, like this is an asset. This is actually Serenity itself, so it's got a ship logo over there. You have a defense value that needs to be defeated if someone wants to attack it. You have a power value down here, which counts towards your win goal, and then an influence value over here. Different cards have different things, like Zoe here, can be used to start a fight or start a negotiation. Use this over here for your negotiations. This is power for your fight. They also have abilities in here. If they have a lightning bolt, means when you play them, you can activate them automatically, which is kind of cool. And then get your bonus for the Serenity crew here. One of their thing to get their burst tokens here is to have an untriggered character. So when you play a character and use their ability, that triggers them. So you might not want to trigger them when you play them. That way you can get the burst tokens and start stockpiling them up. But yeah, that's a quick look at the Serenity deck. I'll flip through these real quick because I don't want to spend as much time on each one of them. But there we got the Alliance deck. And again, you can see up here, this is different. 1 untriggered, and discard untriggered cards from your hand in tableau with at least 2 power and 2 influence, where Serenity was 4 influence. These are a little bit different. You got activation, issue a warrant, tax a player 1 credit or supply 2 credits, retain and replay. Those I think are the same on everybody's. Same with the activation one. Then we got the Alliance characters and things. Again here, this is asset, so it would go in the asset section of your board. This is an item, so it would have to go in the item section. And there's a character, you'd have to go in a character section. Sorry for the glare. I do sleeve things, especially when I'm planning on playing them a lot. These are even really cheap. You can see they don't fit the cards because they're my throwaway sleeves that I use. I will be getting better sleeves for them because I do plan on keeping this one. I really like it so far. So, spoilers ahead to my final thoughts. Next up here we have Badger's Evestown group. And they need to have 2 untriggered characters and at least 2 assets in the tableau to get their burst tokens. Their activation costs 3, resetting a card costs 2, stealing 2 credits from anywhere costs 1, and then the retain and replay. Of course, you have Badger. I think it's a bunch of his henchmen and their equipment. And I like how each deck is completely different to start, which is where those asymmetrical player boards come in too. And then finally we have Niska here, and Niska has one untriggered character, and discard a card from your hand with exactly 3 power or 3 influence, and that's discard 1 card. So that can be rough, but you can set it up. And he's got the +1 activation, +1 retrigger, draw a card, and then retain and replay. And there's Niska himself. And then his mercenary henchman, his Skyplex. Everything's themed to the character, which is kind of cool. So those are our 4 starting player decks. And the rest of the cards here, which are an absolute mess, I got them sorted out. So the rest of the decks are separated out. You can see down here in the bottom corner, as well as on these, are the action cards. So these are all supply cards. So again, you have all these shiny cards, which are going to go on the shiny space here. You have all the black cards, which are going to go on the black space. And then the rest of these are going to be based on what setup you're playing. I think the basic is to use the Palaver cards here, which go on the deal. Misbehave, which go on the fight. Crazy Ivan, which are going to go on maneuver. And then Full Burn, which is also a maneuver card. I'm going to put them there. Then you also have Double Cross, which is another fight card. Fei Wu, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but it's also a maneuver card. You have a negotiation card called Negotiation, which is an interesting one. The Dart here, which is labeled as a maneuver, but it also has a fight symbol, so I'm curious on that one, but it is maneuver down here on the bottom. And that's all those. So again, you can mix and match those based on how you're setting up. We have the Reaver cards here, which again are a variant I have not played yet. I'm assuming they come up and then you try to defeat them. I don't know what I don't even know what some of the things are on here, to be fair. I have not played with that variant, but there's a handful of those. There aren't as many. There's what, 8 of them? And then we go on to our actual, I don't know what they call these supply decks, but which I buried underneath here. Core, they only have that one listed as a core. These again are labeled in the bottom corner here, which is not going to focus there. You can see here core. There's 25 of each of these to help you. They are numbered. And these are going to be your available market decks down here. Granted, I buried that, so I won't be able to put them where they go. But you can see here, there's a cruiser. It's a type of ship. And again, you have your defense up here. You have your power and your influence down here. And there's a bunch of these. These are the core. You see there's ships in here, planets, items, characters you can pick up. All kinds of interesting things. And one thing to note on these is that they have a faction logo up here in the corner. And it gives you, basically makes them easier to nav for people that are in that faction. Anybody can get them. You can add any character to any player's deck. But based on the faction logo up here in the corner is who has an easier time of getting them. Doesn't mean you can't snatch somebody from somebody and add them to your deck. So that is going to be the core deck. Then we have the rim deck, and again, these all have the same backs because you're deck building, you're adding them to your cards. So that makes it a little annoying to sort things out, but again, they're labeled down here in the corner, if it'll focus, and numbered to make it easier to separate things out in the end. They also have faction logos on here, what deck they go in. So again, we have characters, items, assets, all kinds of neat things. I'm going through them fast. I'm sorry. You have to pause if you want to read. It's my favorite ship, at least in the other Firefly game. I think that's actually a picture of the other Firefly game board too. Well, most of these are screenshots out of the show. I thought that was interesting. And then we have our border deck, which is here. I think I did these out of order, not that it matters. But same as the others. A card like this requires that you have a ship. And for having a ship, it makes this worth 1 extra power. You have your defense up here. This has no power or no influence on its own. There's Wash. A lot of characters and places from the show make an appearance in here. Kind of reminds you of some things. If you're a fan of the show, you see things pop up and you'd be like, I remember that. I remember that episode. This is an interesting one. Is that Jane Cobb, since he's a mercenary, does not get the bonus if you're playing with Serenity crew and try to recruit him. He doesn't care where he goes as long as he gets paid. He actually does have to be paid. Kind of thematic too. And then finally, the last thing we got here are our credit tokens and their little cardboard chips with money on them. And these can be used in negotiations basically to buy extra influence. And that is a look at everything that comes inside the Misbehavin box. I'll do a quick run through on how the game works and how to play, and then I'll come back and give you my final thoughts at the end. So here we have everything set up for a 4-player game. Keep in mind I've got everything squished together just to get it on camera. You're going to want to leave yourself room up here because you have a display area up here which you're going to be playing cards to. But for our example here, I kind of squished everything to make it fit. But yeah, keep that in mind when you're setting up your own game. So everybody is going to have your starting deck here. You're going to shuffle them up, and then you're going to draw 5 cards. And then that's going to be your starting hand. You also have a variety of different actions you can choose during your turn. The first one is going to be, there's 4 different action types. The first type is going to be activation. And for an activation, you can do a couple different things. The first thing on that is to take a card from your hand. So in this case, we got Zoe. We can place Zoe to our tableau in front of us into a character slot, which is still kind of off the screen there. But so you play her down there, that counts as an activation. With the lightning bolt on here means we can play her and activate her automatically. That would count as a single activation. However, because of the way our verse token thing here works, we're not going to do that. We're just going to play her. The second thing you can do for an activation is if we had already had her in play and she's ready like this, we could turn her sideways to activate her to use that ability. Again, we're playing her this turn, so we don't want to do that, but so playing a card from your hand to here or using a card that's already out there are 2 different types of activations. The other one is to pick a fight, in which case you would take this token, place it on somebody else's card, and then you get to choose if you're attacking it to kill it, which will send it to their discard, or if you're attacking it to nab it, in which case if you win, it goes to your discard and you get to keep the card. Also, to do the fight icon, you would need to play a card that has a fight symbol up here, which would go up in your display area there to declare the attack. And we'll get more into fight in a minute. The next one is to negotiate, which is this one here. And again, you have to play a card with that symbol to your area, and then you go through the process for that, which we'll get in more detail in a minute. But for now, we're just going to put Zoe into our play area. That's going to be our activation for the turn. The next one we have is to recruit. And during a recruitment, we can basically play cards to buy something from out here. You're recruiting them to your deck. And then the final action type would be to spend verse. So if you have earned verse tokens through your ability here, you could then spend them to do different things. So if we were going to do, I'm not going to go through whole turn phases because that would be way too complicated. So I'll just go through each of the actions. So if we were going to, that was the playing a card to act, adding a card to the tableau. We went over tapping a card to use its ability, activating, triggering, I think they call it. The other one is to initiate a fight, which I said you need that logo. So we would put her out here on our play area, say that we're declaring a fight, put this on the target of the fight, and then say if you are going to try to defeat it, to keep it, or just to kill it. And we'll just, for this example, say they have this here. So we say we're going to attack her. On her card here, she has a defense of 4. You can use that defense for the main card. They don't really get to participate in the fight. You just use whatever's up in that corner. So in this case, that's what we're going after. And then we're going to compare our power here. So we have a power 2. They have a defense of 4. So we get to add cards from our hand. And they have to have the fight logo up here to be used for this. In this case, we can add another 2. So we're going to add that to Zoe. And that would give us a 4. In the case of a tie, the attacker would win. In this case, we're going to say we're going to try to nab her. So now, the player that's being attacked would get a chance to play some of their cards, which I haven't drawn here. So, and in their hand here, he has the Torturer here, which has the fight symbol, contributes another 1, so he can play him to their display area. He adds 1 to their defense, so now they have a 5, we have a 4. We would fail in this case. Had we succeeded, this card would come to us, it would go into our discard, and later we would be able to draw it out. In this case, we failed. And failing is not necessarily bad. You're going to lose all these cards we played. They're going to go to our discard because we didn't succeed. However, whoever wins the fight gets an option. On the back of here, it shows us whoever you add in your power, whoever wins gets a +1 card, so you can draw a card. You can get +1 burst token, which is one of your faction tokens, or you can get a credit. And that goes regardless. So in this case, the defender won. They can choose any of those. They probably want to choose to draw a card since they spent a card on this, and now they're going to be short a card for their turn. You can't attack the defender again if it was nabbed or dispatched. So in this case, since they won the fight, you can actually attack them again, which is kind of cool. And that's basically how a fight works. If the attacker wins, not only would you be able to get this or discard it, however you'd plan on doing it, you would also get that reward of the burst token, the draw card, or the credit. So keep that in mind. It does pay to be the attacker and win, because you get more out of it, but being the defender and winning, not only do you get to keep your card, which is probably the best thing, but you also get that bonus. Not really sure on the whole dispatch. So if you choose dispatch instead of nabbing, this card would just go to their graveyard, which means they could shuffle it around. Eventually it'll come back to their hand, and they can just put it back out again. And I realize I had her in this wrong area. She should be down in the character section, but this was just an example. But 90% of the time, you're going to want a nab to add them to your deck. I'm not sure. I guess sometimes there's certain characters that might not fit with the combos and things you're trying to build up. And in that case, doing destroy instead of nab makes sense. But most of the time, I think you're going to be doing the nabbing thing. So it's kind of an odd thing there. But anyway, that's pretty much how the fight action works. So rewinding things back, putting our cards back the way they should be here. The last option here is to make a deal. And making a deal counts as an activation, so it's your activation for the turn. But it allows you to play any card, like I said, with the make a deal icon, which we only have Zoe right here. And then instead of using our power or whatnot, we're going to use our influence. So once she's out there, we have our 1 influence. We can use any card out here that has a 1, which I think the lowest thing out here right now is a 2 for the shiny cards. You never want to buy the black cards because they're actually bad. They're penalties that you get. So we need at least a 2. We can play something else from our hand that has, in this case, another 1 on it, which will get us our 2. I think that's all we have. So yeah, we can play this. Has a 1, add that 2 there, so that gives us a 2. We can also spend credits. So in this case, we could spend a credit with that, and we have a 3 now. So we could buy something with a 3, which would give us Palabar here, Crazy Ivan, or Shiny, I think, because there's still 4s over here. We could add another card with a +1 to give ourselves a 4. Then it gives us actions like Vera here, Shari, I think that's it, Full Burn, or Misbehave. And we can add them directly to our hand, which is what makes the make a deal thing cool. So in this case, if we spend all this, we get our 4, we want a Misbehave card, that would go directly to our hand. And we could play that this turn. That one really doesn't do us any good. So you don't want to use something that you could play that turn if you wanted, because it's being in your hand. You can use it to trigger something else later in the turn. That's a cool way to do it. And like I said, when you spend your token for that, these would all go to your discard, and the card you buy would go to your hand. Now, what makes that unique is that in making a deal, not only does the card go to your hand, but you still get to recruit a card for the turn. So if you pick something up that has a high value to use for recruitment, come the recruitment step of your turn, you get to try to recruit somebody out of there as well. Then you get to the recruitment step here, and gives you a chance to get another card out there. So if you did make a deal, you can still get a card through recruitment. So that's kind of neat. And unfortunately, in the first turn here, you're not going to have a lot. So if we pick everything back up, we can go through the same process, except during the recruitment phase, you do not have to have the negotiation thing. So you can play any card out there. So in this case, we may want to hang on to Zoe and use these others. Either way, they're going to the graveyard. So we could do these 2 and save her if we wanted, get a 2 from that. And it plays out pretty much the same, though, as you're spending influence cards to buy things out there. Big differences are that you do not need the negotiation symbol to trigger it. You can play any card from your hand. You cannot use credits when recruiting. You have to only use influence on cards. And whatever card you buy goes to your discard pile, not to your hand. So you have to keep those things in mind. But that's how the recruitment thing works. Eventually, you're going to add cards to your deck that build things up. You can also spend cards that are active out here. So if we had Zoe out here in our character slot, we could spend her, but she's going to go from the active tableau area to the display area, which would mean she'd go to the discard at the end. And then the final step after that would be the burst tokens. So if you had gained any burst tokens throughout the turn, this is when you would get them, or you could use them to do different things. Certain ones required you to use them at specific times, like in the case of the retain ability. If you had a token that you earned, you could spend the token to get a, in this case, had we had Zoe out here, we played her to the area. In order to use her, we could spend our token to retain her, and then instead of leaving, she would come back to the play area, or back to your hand if it was something you played from your hand. Replay allows you to use maneuver cards a second time, so you can spend a burst token and use them for that, as well as the other activation options and things like that that you can gain from those. You can also use the burst tokens on those cards. For example, there's probably nothing out there right now. Jabal early there, if you were playing the Alliance character, you could use one of your tokens, had you earned them, to reduce his cost. So basically, they count as 1 towards the cost because he has their faction logo on them. There's also a couple of other abilities related to the verse tokens that are unique to certain factions. Like the Alliance has the tax ability, Niska has a re-trigger ability, and Badger has an ability to steal credits. So those are unique to the different factions for those. But that's the basics of the turn. So in our case, we put Zoe out. The turn would go around. It would come back to us. We're going to discard all of our cards at the end of our turn, and then we're going to draw 5 new ones. And then you have your hand that you're going to hang on to for the next round. So that's kind of interesting. Remember that you do that at the end of your turn. You're going to discard, grab a hole in your hand. It gives you a turn to plan out what you're going to do. Also gives you a full hand of cards to defend yourself with. And then our turn comes back around. And it's worth noting, I kind of skipped over in the beginning, you have those 4 different actions that you can choose. You can do them in any order as long as you only do each one once. So in this case, right off the bat, we already have Zoe in play and she's untriggered. We could discard our Serenity card, which has our 3 power, send that to our discard, and that would be our 1 untriggered card in the tableau, and discarding a card. Oh, that only had 3. So we would need 4. We would need to throw something else in there too. So that gives us 4 power. Discard cards from your hand or tableau with a total power of at least 4. And that would give us a burst token. So we could do that first off. Then we could use Zoe to activate her as our activation to do something with her for the turn. And because we did the activation after, she was untriggered at the time we gained the Verse token. So things like that to keep in mind. You also have the recruit action as well as the normal activation. So you can do those in any order you want as long as they're only done once. And those are the basics. You're going to keep going. In this case, we'll put out another character and so on instead of doing all that. But you'd eventually get more and more cards out here on front of you. So let's say if we didn't do that and we had Serenity out here. Oh, that's not Serenity. We had Serenity out here. And then, granted, you wouldn't be able to do this all in one turn. This is just an example. Get that out there as an asset. So now you look at our total here. And of course, it's off the screen. But Mal's worth 2. Zoe's worth 2. Serenity's worth 3. And You Can't Take the Sky From Me is worth 2. So right there, that gives us 9 out of, in a 4-player game, we need to get to 11. And that's the basics of how to win. And even with that 9 there, let's say we had another asset here and an item here. That gives us another one there, another one there. So that is 9, 10, 11. So that, at the end of our turn, we would have to declare we have our 11 points. It would go around the board. Everybody would get a chance basically to nab or kill something out of here to hurt us. And if it comes back to our turn and we still have 11 points on the board, we would win the game. And as it's going around, basically you have your hand of your cards to defend yourself, to try to stop it. If somebody succeeds in nabbing one of your cards or destroying one of your cards, nobody else can attack you that turn. So you have to keep that in mind. If once they get somebody successful, they can't really just gang up on you. You can only do one. So ideally, they're going to want to go for the most valuable thing out here. So in our case, it would be Serenity. Blow Serenity up, and we're 3 points down. Now we got to work that and earn that points back. So that's the basics of the game. It was a really rough overview, I know, I'm sorry. But it gives you the gist of how to play. And I get to my final thoughts. So my thoughts on the game, I really like the concept. Obviously like the theme. I love deck builders. I'm a huge Ascension fan. And I like the set supplies over here that are going to be common the entire game. They are limited. There's only a certain amount of them. But once they're used, they go back. So you really have to think about buying those because they're one-use bonuses. And then you lose them. Some of these are very powerful, good cards. Other ones, like the black, are a negative that you don't want in your deck. And they basically filler when you draw them. They suck. And you need to get rid of them. This over here having 3 different supply decks with different themes that change based on, I guess this is the market, that's the supply. I gotta used to call them the right thing. But the market decks over here having 3 different ones of them themed, and the cards in them are variable. So you know what's going to come up when you take a card out of them. And again, the top one is going to be the higher end stuff. The bottom one's the lower end stuff. And there's still hit or misses all the way through there. There's useful cards in there along the way, like Jane here. It's only 4 to pick up. He's a 3 power, which is really nice, but you have to pay him money. So if you run out of credits, he goes to your discard. So there's a lot of cool things in there. I really like the concepts of them. The asymmetrical nature at first I thought was going to bother me, but it kind of works for it. The biggest problem I have there is that each one of the decks being themed to a different faction, everyone wants to play Serenity. Everyone wants to be Mal in the crew. You get the occasional person who wants to play Niska, the evil, scary people. But the other factions, the Alliance and Badger, don't really get picked that much. Everybody wants to play Serenity, and that kind of hurts it. You can still nab the Serenity crew, you can nab the ship, you can pick up the other crew members that are in the supply decks. I keep calling it in the market decks, and so there's still that aspect of it. But having Mal and Zoe in your starting deck, having Serenity in your starting deck, everybody wants to play this faction, so it's kind of expected and asymmetrical. Not necessarily that they're a better faction, they're just these are the heroes of the story, so everyone wants to play them. So it's kind of like playing a Star Trek game where 90% of the people want to play the Federation. Same concept. Not a huge deal, but it's something to keep in mind. The other one that is kind of odd is that the in most deck builder games out in your market area, you'll have cards that you can acquire through influence and cards that you can combat, and you get a bonus for combating versus adding cards to your deck when you buy them. And maybe it's just the games I'm used to, but that's kind of seems the norm in deck builders. In this case, you can only acquire cards out here to add to your deck. If you want to combat or destroy anything, it needs to be direct PvP. So you need to, I'm attacking you, and then they can defend themselves and so on. So that aspect of it is a little strange. We're not normally a direct PvP type players, which is why I like Ascension. In Ascension, all your combat is done during here. Worst case is you defeat a monster and it destroys an artifact that somebody else has, and this seems a lot more personal. You're directly going after people. Now it could be to steal a card to add to your deck. They have something you want, or it could be to winslay them. They're about to hit their objective, or they're getting close to it, and you want to take off some of their points. So it seems a little more personal when you're going directly after a person. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just a concept to keep in mind. It might not go over well with your play group based on who you're playing with. I know my family doesn't like direct confrontation games. A little bit of take that on the side's one thing, but when you're just specifically going after someone, it's not a huge thing. At least here, and then you have the little more complexity added to the game with these verse tokens, trying to achieve this objective on your verse card to get those extra tokens. You save up those tokens, you could do the extra abilities. It seems a lot more complicated than it really is, and I don't know. It adds a little bit more uniqueness to the different characters, but at the same time, it's a little fiddly to me. I always forget about it, to be honest. And other than that, though, I think everything works the way it's intended. Tapping things out here to activate them, trigger them, to get various abilities. There are things that give you additional abilities, like you can spend the burst tokens to get additional abilities, so it adds strategy to that, and you have to save those up and plan ahead to do that kind of stuff. I definitely think I need to play it some more to learn the more ins and outs. There are some things I'm sure I didn't explain very well in my quick overview, but we also haven't played a couple of the variants. I'd also like to try the symmetrical backsides of the player boards to see how that changes things, because I think that might throw a monkey wrench in things like Badger's 4 and 4 over there. Suddenly he gets 5 and 5. He's on par with the Alliance when it comes to that. So that's a very interesting change. Same thing with Serenity here. You get that extra asset. And curious to see how that changes up the game. We have not played with the backsides of those. Have not played with the Reavers and of course, the various scenarios that switch up what's out here and give you various victory conditions. But wanted to get this video out, so I played a few base games with just the base rules just to see how it went, and so far I like it. It's just a lot more than I was expecting out of a deck builder. The asymmetrical nature of that is a big part of it. Overall, though, I think it's a good game, and can't wait to try out some of the other things. I think it'll be available by the time this video goes up. It was coming out here soon, and definitely worth looking into if you're into deck builders, if you want something a little more than your standard deck builder, and of course if you're a fan of Firefly, just keep in mind that everybody's going to be fighting over a specific faction, and that's one major thing. A couple negatives to say about the game, and it's not horrible, but the insert. The insert does not support sleep cards, which would be very simple if these decks were all the way down like this side is and turned sideways. You could put cards in there on their side. They would fit just fine. They got this huge section over here, so maybe they thought about that and they wanted you to store your cards in there. But because of the way it's raised up, I don't know if you can see there, they sit up above the lip by like quarter-inch or so, so you can't stack them in that way. You got to stack them flat, and they do fit flat, but you need something. There should have been a divider here, I think. The other thing is the way that the boards sit in here, and I don't know if I can do this without making a mess. We'll try. This board in particular, let's see if I can find it. Well, if I look at this side, I know you can see it. You can see right there. It does not look bad yet, but it's on both sides too. I don't know where it is on that side. Not nearly as bad. It's right there. But you can see this came shipped that way with this dented already. And that is from putting it in here. Let's see if I can line it up. It rubs right there on that. They made these a little too snug, and that pushes in on the board, and it's actually starting to damage the board there. This side isn't too bad because they're much wider spots, but that little narrow nub there is starting to damage the board. They also came kind of warped, and I don't know, this one, you can kind of see it a little on, but things slide underneath there because the boards don't lay completely flat. Not a big deal. These are a little thinner than I would expect for boards too, but there's so many of them in here. Not a huge issue, but it is something to be aware of, that maybe this should have been a little thicker or cut just a hair larger. Granted, the board would have shifted slightly, but it would keep it from getting damaged, and I may trim that down just a hair just to keep that from going. But that's really the only complaint, kind of a nitpicky thing. Overall, I really like the way everything combos together. I didn't go through a lot of the card combinations, so when you have cards out here, there's like the Alliance has these Marines, and when you play a Marine into the display area, they get a bonus for every other Marine, so they start compounding. You get two of them out there. Instead of being a one, now there it's two each, so you have a four. So they spiral pretty cool because you get one for one, four for two, and so on. There are cards in here too that modify or bonus other cards, and that's where these little tokens come into play, which I don't think I showed. But overall, it's a great game and a fun deck builder, if a little more complicated than you first expect. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something to keep in mind. I wish there was a more basic version. I think maybe if you played without the burst tokens and things, I don't know what I would change to make it more basic, but at the same time, doing anything to change like that would offset the balance, I think, of the way the abilities for your faction work on those cards. Yeah, definitely an interesting, fun game. I can't wait to play it some more and try out some of the other variants. So that's going to wrap it up for our look at Firefly Misbehavin. If it looks like something that might be interesting to you guys, definitely check it out. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.